Welcome back to the Housing Collective podcast. My name is Tom Neely, founder and director of Nemo Search, and today I'm thrilled to be joined by Andy Hulme, Chief Executive of Hyde. So Andy, thank you ever so much for joining us today. And for the listeners, could you give us an introduction about yourself and your organisation?
Yeah, sure. So hi there. Thanks for having me, Tom. So I'm 2.5 years into Hyde. I joined Hyde 2.5 years ago, and feel like I've been here forever, to be honest. But Hyde is a predominantly southeast-based housing association. We have about 45,000 social homes. Like all housing associations, we're a charity. We're a not-for-profit organisation, and that means that every penny that we generate through rent, through services that we provide, goes back into our homes, back into our communities. What that means in practice is, in reality, we house some of the most vulnerable people in society and people who would otherwise be excluded from mainstream housing, and we typically offer our homes at about a 50% discount. So demand is pretty high. It's pretty busy.
I could imagine it. And Andy, I'm just keen, obviously this podcast is all around leadership as well. So talk to us a bit more about your journey to becoming Chief Executive of Hyde, because you've got quite an interesting backstory.
Yeah, totally. It's fascinating. So I think people are slightly obsessed with the fact that I used to work for a bank. So I spent 20 years in banking. I worked for 3 different banks. But in reality, I'm a retailer. So I worked for Tesco, I worked for Next, I worked for KFC, and I worked for retail banks. So my entire career has been about identifying and serving customer need, about improving customer outcomes, sometimes doing that financially, sometimes doing that through service, but ultimately trying to do the right thing. And I've always been, in my banking part of my career, I've always been in housing. So I used to sell mortgages in NatWest Preston, in a branch in Preston. Then I became head of strategy for mortgages at the Royal Bank of Scotland, moved into Tesco, moved into Lloyds, always in mortgages, then actually building homes through the Housing Growth Partnership, a joint venture with the UK government where we support, and it's a great business actually, where they support SME house builders to increase their output, they invest in their businesses. And then I became global MD of real estate at Lloyds. So ironically, banking housing associations like Hyde, actually, including Hyde were my client. It was made for a very interesting job interview. So
I bet it did. It's quite a long one, I could imagine, because it's quite an extensive background.
It was quite a process.
And just on that then, Andy, I guess talk to us about how your journey, because it is a really interesting journey, shaped the leader that you are today.
It's really interesting. So I'm sort of working class background. First person in my family to go to university, all that sort of the classic story. We grew up in council housing, all those sorts of things, and just normal people. From I'd say the north of England. I think technically it's the Midlands, but down in London where I live now, people tend not to know where the Midlands is. So north of England, and we're just sort of good, honest people, normal people. And for me, what was really fascinating was I was probably the first person in my family that left university, needed a job, applied to work for a bank. Got a job in NatWest branch in Preston, as I said before, and actually it was just always about trying to do the right thing and trying to be the best I could be. And I'm sort of not, I don't massively subscribe to kind of leadership styles, all that stuff. For me, it was about you be the best you can be, and it's going to be what it's going to be. And throughout my career, people have said to me, "Well, you're really ambitious," and actually, I'm not ambitious at all. I think my job is to do. If I'm going to be here, I might as well do the best I can do. And if doing the best job that I can do and being the best person that I can be, the best leader that I can be, the best line manager that I can be, the best friend to my colleagues that I can be, actually, if that translates into success, if that translates into progression, great. But ultimately, you've got to do the right thing. And if you don't do the right thing, what's the point in trying? And I think we've seen that. We've seen financial crises, we've seen post office scandals, we've seen things, what happens when people do not do the right thing and don't stay true to their values. But for me, if you don't have honesty, if you don't have integrity, what's the point? And if you can keep true to that, then I think actually, whatever happens, that you've done your best.
I think it's fascinating, Andy, because I think a lot of people, senior leaders as well, that we speak to, if you use your background there, kind of working class lad that's kind of then ended up in a kind of branch in Preston, and then all of a sudden then gone to become the global MD of Lloyds. Surely you have to stay true to your values, but arguably a lot of people say sometimes I do feel a bit of kind of I guess imposter syndrome, because naturally you may be talking to as a global MD at Lloyd may not be, with the greatest respect, a working class lad working in the Preston kind of bank. So, how do you feel? Talk to us about, in your view, the power of authenticity.
You only get imposter syndrome. I think it's like two things, right? One is, do you lack confidence? And I think that definitely happens, and we see it. We see it, with people with disabilities who are part of minority groups, whether that's ethnicity, sexuality, disability, whatever. We do see there are groups who are less likely. Even females. Women make up half of society. Yet we know that when they're applying for a job, the evidence says unless they can sort of tick all the boxes, they may not have that confidence to apply. Wherever you're a man, they tend to kind of go, well, I can do a couple of these bits, I'll wing it and see what happens. And I think for me, there's definitely a confidence bit. We need to kind of, to encourage and foster that growth if we want to be more diverse. But there's also a bit about, you will probably get imposter syndrome if you're faking it. Where if you are authentic and true to yourself, you won't get it. So I was always a bit of an odd fit in banking because everyone else was wearing a sort of pinstripe suit and L's and G's and a t-shirt. I used to come to work with my trainers and they'd all look at me like I was mad. And that doesn't mean that if you've got an important meeting, you can all put a suit on for an important meeting, or you go to a family wedding or whatever and you dress up for it. We can all do that, of course we can. But if you're not sort of comfortable in yourself, if you're not being yourself, you're not going to be at your best. And if you can't be yourself, you can't thrive. So for me, actually, I think I always think when people talk about authentic leadership, it's always slightly inauthentic. Because actually, what they're really saying is, what I'm going to tell you is I think this is what you want to hear, rather than this is actually what it is. And for me, I'm back to you do your best, right? Just do your best, be yourself. And I'm really, my thing about Hyde is great, and I think he's a great guy. And I'm really clear to him that at some point, if my style, my leadership, what I think is important to Hyde does not align to what the board thinks is right, then we should have that conversation. And that's okay. That's been a grown up. So far, so good. So fingers crossed. But
And on that, then, Andy, you obviously joined Hyde back in the beginning of 2022. So talk to me a bit more about that journey. So when you joined back in January 2022, what were some of the pain points that you've had to really focus on and address quickly?
Yeah, it's been really interesting because Hyde wasn't quite what I thought it was. Obviously, I knew Hyde through my relationship with them as a client, and Hyde is actually fundamentally a great organisation. We have brilliant people. People are here for the right reasons. Everybody means well. We want to do our best. But the bit that surprised me was we were probably not as focused on our customers as we needed to be. I deliberately call our customers because I think, I don't know if it's a mixed bag, right? But I think if you refer to residents and tenants, it's sort of transaction. It sounds like you're here to transact with someone and to sort of process a request. If you refer to someone as a customer, actually you're there to serve them. And our job is to serve that need and to respond to that ask, that query, that inquiry. So there's been a big piece of work about how do we pivot towards our customers? How do we get closer to our communities? So when I joined, and housing is complicated. So when I joined, this big building safety remediation projects, fire safety work going on, investment in our homes, building new homes. There's a real sort of technical skill set and competency required. And we'd grow quite a sort of big head office to deliver that. And it meant that maybe a third of our colleagues were customer facing. And everyone else was sort of, sat in head office doing brilliant work, but they weren't out there in our communities. And what we've done is we've turned that on its head. And now 75% of our colleagues are customer facing. They are in our communities. We've brought colleagues back. In fact, I'm sat on one of our estates at the minute. So I'm literally sat above our community centre, and after this meeting, I'm going downstairs to have a cup of tea with the community and have a catch up. So we are in our communities. We've doubled the amount of time that we spend in our communities. We've connected colleagues through digital, which has been a sort of £25 million transformation programme. We're now seeing nearly half of our transactions online, with customers choosing to self-serve, to engage digitally. And what we're seeing through that, digital's like an iceberg. The sort of front end bit is how you kind of raise your query. But the reality of it is the power of it is how you connect to the back end. So actually, when someone says, can you do this? Whether they choose to do that on the phone, whether they choose to do that online themselves, whether they write us a letter, whatever it may be, whether they ask us in the street, actually, how do we then process that through and track it and make sure that it's happened? So we know that we have fulfilled that request efficiently And we've seen a huge reduction in failure demand. We've seen an improvement in customer satisfaction. We've seen a reduction in complaints. And it's really working. It's been very expensive. It's been really difficult to make it work, but it's been absolutely worth that investment. And at the same time, we have been investing millions into our community centres, more than we've ever invested into our communities. We've got more homes under construction now than we've ever had under construction. So we're live on sites that will deliver about 6,500 homes. We're really passionate about that. Nearly all of them are affordable. And that means social rent or affordable housing for first-time buyers. We don't build penthouses. We build attainable and aspirational homes. And we are so proud of that. And it's great. And it's been really hard because trying to have both of those sides of the sort of equation and support customers in their time of need. Charitable Foundation supported 30,000 customers last year who've been finding it tough. Our food banks feed 2,500 families a month. Trying to do all of this when frankly there's not enough money because of historic rent settlements from the previous government and things. It's really difficult. But we are laser focused on driving out efficiencies of finding better ways of doing it. We've insourced repairs. We do 120,000 repairs a year. We do 96% of them ourselves now. A year ago, it was about 25%. What we're seeing is that satisfaction with the operative, the sort of Hyde man in the Hyde van, as it were, is 97%. The person that is in your home fixing the broken tap or whatever it may be, our customers like that person. 97% of them are saying, yeah, the guy that turned up, the lady that turned up, whoever it was, they were great. They were on time, they were polite, they were friendly, they've got a uniform on, they introduced themselves and they fixed it, and it was great. And that's really positive. It's been really hard to achieve, and we still get it wrong sometimes. But we're really proud of it. There's more to do. There's always more to do, isn't there?
Of course there is. But you're definitely on the right track, that's for certain. And just around that terminology around moving from, like I say, customers instead of tenants. I mean, just in your opinion, Andy, what could we as a sector do more to be more customer centric?
Do you know, it's interesting. The sector's really... So first off, I think the sector's been brilliant. And I'm so proud that Hyde is a member of the G15, and my sort of peer chief execs have been amazing at welcoming me in and kind of bringing me up to speed and telling me when I'm wrong and all that sort of good stuff, So I'm kind of learning as I go. I think what has surprised me is the sector's quite inwards looking. So we tend to benchmark, and it's actually, again, back to the funding model, but it's really difficult to deliver housing at what is effectively a 50% discount. And Hyde completed some research on behalf of the G15 recently that said that across the G15, we have 300,000 homes in London that don't pay for themselves. We house 1 in 10 Londoners, and most of those homes are loss-making for us. We spend more maintaining them, fixing them, improving them than we collect in rent. So on a cash basis, that is a problem. At the same time, and what that means is, it's sort of like a race to the bottom. So how do you deliver it as cheaply as you can? Yeah, that's what it has to be. But we tend to become sort of inwards looking as we're sort of fighting to get through the storm. And I've never worked anywhere like that. When I sat in Lloyds Bank, we didn't sit there and say, of course we looked at what Barclays were doing and HSBC and whoever else. But we also said, well, what John Lewis doing? How does Amazon do this? What about Facebook? What does good look like? Because my customers don't compare me to another housing association. They compare me to Domino's Pizza. They compare me to John Lewis. They compare me to Tesco. And if I can go to Amazon and get it delivered the next day, well, why can't Hyde deliver that? Because that's the service that I'm used to. That's the service that I expect, because that's what everybody else provides. Why can't... So we are benchmarking ourselves now against other companies that we know our customers shop at. And if that means that Domino's, in fact, our group technology director, Kate from KFC on Pizza Hut, and the tech director there, if she can get you a pizza anywhere in Europe within, 35 minutes, why can't we get the repair done the next day? And why can't I just book it online and the guy turns up and fixes it? And that's our mentality on this. And I think it's making a real difference. But it'll take time to change perceptions as well. So we have seen an improvement in satisfaction. We're really pleased with it. We've seen an improvement in customer outcomes as a result of that. But it also takes time. Delays in the core process, when we have an issue with, say, antisocial behaviour that can destroy a community. Delays in mental health care and provision, both adult and child. Social services being overwhelmed, the NHS, the police service, all of these things have an impact on our communities, because everything that all of the agencies that we work with are under the same strain. And it means that it's actually quite difficult to deliver outcomes at times when you're trying to work with almost a sort of a succession of people that don't quite have the capacity to do their job. And it means we're all sort of having to pull together and try and make it work. It's tough, but that's why we exist. It's our purpose.
Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt. And just on a personal note, Andy, as well, I mean, you obviously made that transition from banking into housing, and you've clearly done quite a significant amount in the 2.5 years that you've been with Hyde. But I guess, how have you found that transition from banking into housing? And a secondary part to that question is, what advice would you give to leaders thinking about moving into the housing sector from a commercial sector like yourself?
Genuinely, it's been weirdly easy. And I think that's been, I was a housing banker, right? So I kind of get housing. So that definitely helps. But actually, the sector's really welcoming. And yeah, I think the public think that banks do kind of weird, dark or clever things that no one quite knows what it is. What they fundamentally do is serve millions of customers every single day and help them when something goes wrong. And they're not always popular, right? I'm not pretending that they are, but fundamentally, it's not that different. If I look at my customers in Hyde, we've got 105,000 people living in our homes, including just under 20,000 children. Actually, about a quarter of them bank with Lloyds Banking Group, my old bank. Many of them would have been served by me at some point. And that might have been, I might have answered the phone to them or sent them an email or given them a mortgage or whatever it may be, So it's not that far away. And, I think, again, there's this sort of perception in social housing that, and we see surveys actually where, do the public think social housing is a good thing? Yes. Would they like to live next to a social housing estate? Maybe not. And ironically, they all do, but they don't realise it. So that I live around the corner from one of our big estates. In fact, where I'm sat today, and I go to the pub on a Saturday night, and I bump into my customers, I bump into my residents. We drink in the same pubs, we go to the same shops, we shop on the same high street. Every Saturday morning, half of them know my kid. Every Saturday morning, when I'm out buying bread and milk, I bump into my customers and we have a chat. And we're not having a chat about damp and mold and a leak and the fact that something has gone wrong. We're having a chat about the weather and what they're up to today and normal things. We're just normal people, and we are no different. And I think the perception that we're sort of sat in our ivory towers, as it were, it's just nonsense. We are literally the same people, and we're all trying to help each other. We're all trying to live together. My husband is a teacher, and he has just sort of where his school is. We have houses all around it, and about a quarter of his children live in my homes. And therefore, we work with his school, not because my husband works there, but because we work with his school, because it improves the outcome for the children that live in our homes, that live in our communities. And that's what all housing associations are doing. And again, it's back to that bit that says the sector's not understood or recognised for what it does. We are charities trying to serve communities. And we can see the value of that, because we can see that when we get it right, we have... it takes pressure off the police, it takes pressure off the NHS, it takes pressure off the schools, it gets better outcomes, and people can thrive in a home that's warm, that's safe, that's dry, that they might not otherwise have, that gives them stability, a tenancy for life. That means you can be part of that community. It means you know where your kids are going to go to school. You're not constantly moving. You don't have to delay your life decisions because of it, because of that uncertainty. And I think it's brilliant. The sector's brilliant. So I've really... 2.5 years in, it's very difficult, but I think I feel passionately that it's a brilliant sector and we're doing the right thing.
And I'm sure it's flown as well, Andy.
Yeah, it has. It really has. It's weird. On the one hand, I feel like I've been here forever. On the other hand, I feel like I joined yesterday. Like, it's kind of weird, I was reading, as we were emailing to organise this call, I was reflecting, because you said in one of the emails, or relatively new, and I was thinking, I'm like, I feel like I've been here forever.
Just looking at the calendar going, really?
It's so funny.
Oh, David. And obviously one thing that you did just mention, Andy, just explaining kind of that background and that transition, is that you referred to yourself as a housing banker in your previous career. So you were obviously involved in the Help to Buy scheme during your banking career. So how when you reflect on that experience now, How do you reflect on that? But now you're in the sector.
So look, I was group head of mortgages at Lloyds Banking Group at the time. So we supported 1 in every 4 mortgages in the UK. We were the biggest lender to first-time buyers. We were the biggest lender to new build. It was kind of what we did, and I was the lead bank advisor for Help to Buy. So working with the government to make sure that Help to Buy structurally worked for the bank, that it worked for our customers, and it was something that we could deliver. So we were first to market. We were the first bank to sign off. And I'm really proud of it. It was a great experience working with the government. It was probably the most successful government intervention in getting people onto the housing ladder in the history, because we'd had New Buy and My New Home and things like Right to Buy. Right to Buy. Actually, it was a few 100,000 homes that were funded or sold through Right to Buy. Everyone's got a view on it, but actually, Help to Buy helped millions of people to buy their first home. So in that regard, what a fantastic scheme. And it got the banks back up to higher loan to value lending, which they probably couldn't have done without that intervention. And they hadn't been in that space since the financial crisis, and that meant people suddenly could buy homes with a smaller deposit. What I also think, though, is that the scheme didn't evolve quickly enough. So when I look at the scheme, what it actually meant for me was that, and it was frustrating because it was the first scheme that didn't have means testing in it, that the government had launched in housing. And what it meant is it was kind of open to everybody. And that's okay in a way, because it's sort of fair. But what it meant is when you looked at it, about a third of my customers that were buying it didn't need Help to Buy mortgage to buy the home. And they were using it to buy a bigger home. Now, you could argue that's a good thing, because then they can settle that community, they can grow their family and those sorts of things. But what it also meant was the sort of average number of people per home fell, and the average size of a home, average number of bedrooms in a home, grew. So we ended up in a situation where builders were building more bigger homes, more family homes, if you like, and people were sort of rattling around in them. And I'm not sure that was quite what it was intended for. I think, the people buying it, using it to buy their home, didn't necessarily look like first-time buyers. And I think they should have better calibrated and means tested the scheme as it went through. And I think they should have tweaked the rules earlier. And I think it's a real shame, actually, that I actually don't like how they've exited it. I think they should have actually kept it, but for a sort of subset of people. But what it did do is it did serve a purpose, because it got everybody up to higher loan to value lending. That helped you think about buying your house. The biggest challenges typically are the affordability. So can you afford do you earn enough money to pay the mortgage every month? But also the deposit. With house prices being so high, that's the reality. The only way you solve house prices is supply and demand, as you build more homes. So again, Hyde building affordable aspirational homes, being in fact the biggest provider in the southeast of England of affordable housing over the next 5 years, we're told, of grant funded housing over the next 5 years. And that's a great thing, because it's helping young families, it's helping first time buyers. But it is helping those people who are more able to buy. We mustn't lose sight of the people that still need social rent, that still need, let's call it council housing, good old fashioned social housing, whether that's provided by a council, through a council, or by a housing association like Hyde is irrelevant. We all work together. What we need is better access to housing.
Yeah, definitely. And in addition to this, Andy, last question around your background in banking, but I think there are some synergies there. You obviously, you worked through quite a challenging time with 2008 in banking. So what lessons from that time do you find applicable to some of potentially the challenges that you're facing in the sector right now?
Yeah, so look, it was interesting. I was in my 20s when the financial crisis happened, and it was sort of bizarre, because I even ended up in a more senior job because of the financial crisis, because the whole thing was so chaotic that people who were kind of young and junior were given jobs that they probably would never otherwise be given, because everybody was sort of scrambling to survive. The organisations were scrambling to survive. And I saw examples of brilliant leadership and examples of terrible leadership. But I also saw some appalling behaviours. And I think for me, I actually found the whole thing incredibly uncomfortable. And I remember handing back my bonus for that year. And at the time, it was the biggest bonus that I'd ever had earned in banking was the year of the financial crisis. And I worked for a bank that had been bailed out by the UK government. So I remember being absolutely appalled by it and handing it back. and say this is outrageous. And actually, I then left that bank because I felt really uncomfortable about how it had all sort of played out. For me, what was kind of more interesting, and much of it's a blur, right? Because everyone was literally scrambling.
Of course,
around.
yeah.
What's more interesting now is we obviously have just gone through a pandemic. And whilst the pandemic wasn't a financial crisis, and it clearly wasn't financial at all, it had such an impact on companies' abilities to survive, on the government and how they had to prop up companies, support people through furlough and all those things. Our customers just couldn't pay their bills. So it had many characteristics that were the same as the financial crisis. And for me, what was really pleasing, again, it was sort of all, I'd always said I'd never do another financial crisis, but it was all hands to the pump. So what was really pleasing was we were sort of back in that same chaotic environment, albeit we're all kind of locked in at home rather than being sat in an office. And actually, what I didn't see were the behaviours that I saw the first time around in the financial crisis. Because what I saw was colleagues, working so unbelievably hard in incredibly difficult circumstances, whilst trying to support their own vulnerable family, their own vulnerable neighbours, clapping for the NHS, all those things that we did to kind of get through it. And actually, homeschooling their kids, all of that stuff, but doing the right thing. And working, I was so proud of my team, and I was so proud of the guys at Lloyd's at the time, because I just saw thousands of colleagues just doing the right thing, and I didn't see bad behaviours. And I saw banks making really difficult decisions about how to support customers, that from a sort of old-fashioned credit point of view, it would have been much easier to say yes. But the right answer, morally for society, for the customer, for the client, the right answer was to support them in that time of need. And that's what they did. And I think culturally, banking's gone through a transformational change. And I think that's what Hyde's trying to do on a much smaller scale, but we're saying we understand why we're here and what we do. We're quite pure about what we do. We are here to do social housing. That is our core business. If we can build more social homes, more affordable homes, that's a great thing too. But fundamentally, we are here to support customers. We're here to do the right thing in their time of need. And actually, if we can change our culture to be more customer centric, more customer focused, make it easier for customers to access our services, take down those barriers, that's an incredibly good thing. It's incredibly valuable to society. We believe it generates hundreds of millions of pounds a year of value to society through Hyde alone, let alone the broader sector, where that figure goes into the billions. The value of a social tenancy mustn't be underestimated.
No, really interesting. I guess also, Andy, now if we look forward, obviously we've got a new government now. What are your top priorities first for reform in the housing sector?
So, I think so. There's two things that are fundamentally wrong that will stop us from building homes as a sector. That will hinder our ability to maintain and improve our existing homes. And one is certainty over rent settlement. So the government sets our rent; we don't set it ourselves. And we need certainty there. And we're hearing good news there. So hopefully we'll get more certainty for, the next sort of period, let's call it 5-10 years. That's good for us. That's good for our customers. It allows all of us to plan and know where we stand. It allows us to budget and, make the investments we need to. Secondly, though, and this is a sort of southeast of England specific thing, we need something that's called rent convergence. So because of how the last government did not honour the rent settlement that was given, our rents have fallen below what they'd sort of call the market standard. And what it means is our homes make a loss. So the G50, so the big London landlords, we're a member of the group. We house 1 in every 10 Londoners, and we have 300,000 homes that do not pay for themselves between us. 1 in every 10 Londoners, and they just don't pay. And an awful outcome could be that we could be forced to start selling those homes. And that would be a terrible outcome. Because they will become privately owned, they won't be social housing anymore at that point. And that's not right for our customers, that's not right for our organisations, and it's not right for society. So we need the government to give us certainty over rent, and we need them to quickly converge the rent and allow that sort of catch-up to happen. Typically just a few pounds per week per customer, but it would make such a difference on a sort of global scale for our organisations. And that would then allow us to build. We've got to unlock house building because, building homes as a housing charity is not always popular, but actually I need to improve my existing homes. I need to decarbon my existing homes to make them more sustainable, to make them cheaper to live in, to make them easier to live in, for modern day society. and need to build more homes to play our role in helping solve the housing crisis. And we can only do that with certainty and a fair rent settlement. We need planning of things to be unlocked as well. We need more appetite for do those things on a local authority level. But I think all of those things will come. But none of it will make any difference if we can't pay the bills. Because whilst we are charities and every penny goes back into our homes, into improving those homes, every single penny gets reinvested, there has to be money to reinvest in the first place. And if I look at it, we spend more on our social housing portfolio a year than we collect in rent. And that isn't sustainable. So we fund that through our house building, through our commercial activities, through managing homes for others, and lots of other interesting ways of doing it that are also great for us, great for society. But fundamentally, we have to be able to pay our bills so we can survive, and so we can thrive, and so we can invest.
No, definitely. And just out of interest, Andy, obviously you talk about those key strategic priorities. In your eyes, do you see that could be the biggest difference that the government can make to the customer, or is there any areas that you would like to see for government that could actually make a direct impact to the customer as well?
I think the government. We obviously have. It's interesting. We have a government stakeholder. We have a regulator stakeholder. We have a housing ombudsman. So there's a whole bunch of organisations that kind of work with us to guide and help us do what we do and to do it well. And I think lots of those. I think the regulator functions really well. I think that the sector relationship with the housing ombudsman, I think, is not perfect. I think some of the rhetoric from the old government isn't perfect, and it's a sort of parent-child relationship. So if the new government needs to sort of stop pointing the finger, and I think that to be fair, we've had great conversations so far. They need to listen to our challenges, to understand our challenges, and then to work with us to resolve those, because that's how you get better customer outcomes, and that's what we need, and that's what I think we're seeing happening, and that's very different to where we were 2 months ago with the old government. And that can only be a good thing for our customers.
I agree. Brilliant. Andy, I've thoroughly enjoyed this discussion, so thank you for your time this morning. I guess before I let you go, though, we do have to end each podcast episode. We do have some quick fire questions. So as I always say to guests, no pressure. First one, what has been the most valuable leadership lesson that you've learned?
So I used to be the assistant to the MD of NatWest when I was 25 years old or something. And she was a friend of mine now. We're still in touch, and she was an amazing leader. And she was so passionate about, and I talked about it earlier actually. If you are here, if you're going to work 9 till 5 or 8 till 7 or whatever it is that you do, you should just work as hard as you can. You should be the best that you can be, because if you don't, you let yourself down and you let everybody else down. And she said to me, I am too busy to waste my time. Why would I do that to myself? And I just took that, and I've always used it. And whatever I do, I just want to do the best I can do, because that means I can be proud of it and stand by it. And I think if everybody did that, I think we'd have a very different sort of economy. I think we'd have a very different society. I think productivity would improve and all those sorts of things.
Definitely. And I guess if there's any other kind of nuance to this question, Andy, I mean, what advice would you give to an aspiring leader starting out on their journey?
I think you need to find your habits. I've just been reading this really good book. Just come back from holiday with my family, and whilst I was away, I read this book called The Habit of Excellence, which is written by a former army lieutenant in the British Army, and it's brilliant. But the whole thing's about how the army kind of has routine, it has structure, it has habit, and it knows what it stands for. It knows what it does well, it knows where it's weak, and that's kind of how it survives. And actually, I think as young leaders, as new leaders, and we're all leaders, right? You don't need to be a line manager. You don't need to have a big team to be a leader. We're all leaders in our own right. Actually, you need to know what you stand for. You need to find your habits. You need to find what works, and you need to execute it consistently. And it's no different than trying to repair homes. With the way we're trying to pivot towards our customers and to be more customer centric, it's all about getting to the habits, get the routine right, get the sort of the rhythm of it right, and do it again and again and again, and do it brilliantly.
Talk about leadership. What do you see to be some of the key leadership qualities required in today's world?
I think you need. I think empathy is massively important. You need strategy and vision and all those things. But actually, 2024, the world is different. Lots of our staff are millennials, and Gen whatever it is, and actually, people expect different things will work expect different things from their leaders. They want to work differently, not least because most of us are doing hybrid working, between home and the office. And actually, they want to have a relationship with you. They want to be maybe not quite your friend because it's work, right? But they want to be able to talk to you. They want to know that your door's open and you're willing to listen and tell a joke and have a laugh and care when something goes wrong. And that's very different than the sort of formality of leadership even 20 years ago, where your relationship with your boss would quite often be quite formal. So people are after different things. It's part of their sort of experience. You spend a lot of time at work. You need to enjoy it. You need to work with people that you like, that you get on with, that you want to be with. And I think we're all adapting to that. And I think the pandemic accelerated that. We're suddenly sat in people's homes because suddenly, a bit like this call now, we can suddenly see into people's lives. We've sort of all met their kids on Teams, and we've met their dogs and God knows whatever else. And I think actually it's changed how we have to do it. You need trust as well. The long answer to that question, but you also need trust. If people don't trust you, you're losing.
And I think, like you say, empathy is so underrated. But I completely agree. I mean, and final question, which I think you may have just answered, Andy, given your family holiday. So it's one leadership book recommendation you give to the listeners.
Yeah, look, The Habits of Excellence. I bought it at the airport, so I wasn't quite expecting to read it, but I bought it at the airport, jumped on a plane, and sat there reading it for the whole holiday, and it's really good. I also think I get a tiny bit frustrated when I walk into people's offices and there's hundreds of leadership books. I think people should start by reading their complaint letters and responding to their customer emails, because that's how you're going to learn what you need to do, and then you need to work out how you lead through that. But I'd always read. I sit down with our complaints team every single week, and I'd always look through our complaints and talk about our complaints. I respond to every customer email. At this point, I get inundated with them, and no doubt, but I always try and respond to every customer email myself, or make sure that it is handled, and And I think unless you're doing that, you're missing a trick. Because if you can't listen to your customers, what's the point of being a leader?
That's a really fair point. Really fair point. Andy, thank you so much, and thank you for joining us on the Housing Collective podcast as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Speak to you soon.
Thank you.